And thank you for tuning in to the Cook County Bar Association's Live on Can TV. My name is Mika Thompson, and I will be your host today. And to my right and your left is Attorney Lewis Powell. And tonight's topic is the laws that made headlines. If you have any questions about this topic, please feel free to contact us at the number that you see at the bottom of your screen. It's 312-738-1060. And please note you can also watch this live show on the internet. Go to www.cantv.org/live. As you may or may not know, Cook County Bar Association is the oldest association of lawyers, African American lawyers and judges in the United States. We take this time every week on Wednesday at 6 p.m. to provide you information regarding legal issues of import to this larger area of Chicago, the suburbs, and anyone tuning in to this cable network station. Although I'm an attorney and Lewis Powell is an attorney, we at this time do not represent your specific interests. So we advise you to go to the Cook County Bar Association's website, and you can ask for, you can click on the lawyer referral tab, and there will be a list of attorneys that can assist you with answering questions from domestic relations to corporate law, and so on and so forth. So feel free to go to the Cook County Bar Association's website and select an attorney that can address your issues. Okay, today we are going to talk about the laws that have made headlines. And one of the biggest topics, of course, has been the presidential debates. Last night we had the opportunity, the nation had the opportunity to tune in to ABC's network in Chicago. It was about 8 p.m. and they were able to listen to Tim Kaine and Michael Pence debate the issues that are going to be relevant and pressing for the next presidential candidate. That's either Donald Trump, who's the Republican candidate, or Mrs. Hillary Clinton. Well, Secretary of State, right?
That's right.
Secretary of State of Hillary
Former
Clinton.
Senator.
Former senator. And so many of the issues that were facing the candidates as vice president are the issues that the president, who will either be Clinton or Donald Trump, have to contend with. But I do want to address some things that people may not or may be aware of with regards to the law. Now, with regards to, a lot of reference was made to the president's ability to push the button, the nuclear weapons. And how is that possible? Because under the Constitution, Congress has the power to declare war. Isn't that correct?
That's correct to a certain extent. Always exceptions. Now, if there's an emergency situation, as in Osama bin Laden,
right,
where the government made a conscious decision to take him out by any means necessary.
Right.
It's my personal opinion that the government had no intentions of taking him alive.
Right, that's true.
And under the circumstances, perfectly understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of emergency situation, the president does have limited powers in terms of the emergency situation, in terms of going on foreign soil to protect U.S. interests. And U.S. interests could, obviously be U.S. citizens at risk,
mm-hmm.
U.S. embassies overseas at risk, and quite frankly, if they stretch it, U.S. business interests in overseas.
And that is under the Constitution's in the Constitution. It specifically grants the president the power to be the commander-in-chief.
Case in point, it's my understanding, my recollection, that the Vietnam War was never a declared war.
Exactly. And what you're referencing is the power under the Constitution. The Congress has the power to declare. That's what you're
right.
Under Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. And so under that provision, the Congress has the power to declare war. But again, under the Constitution specifically states that the president is the commander in chief of all, basically the military, and so he has over his history, he has been able to basically commit military forces to particular areas outside of the United States.
Under the Constitution has sort of like enumerate, I may be mispronouncing it, but
That's
rights that are powers or responsibility that are specifically stated.
That's
However, the Constitution is a living document that's always open for interpretation. And then it's a limited document. It doesn't mean that the government, the president, the Senate, so forth and so on, the judiciary are automatically boxed in on all situations. There's always some room for flexibility. And also there's room for interpretation in terms of how far a president can go in terms of, carrying out the duties of his office. Case in point with Vietnam. Vietnam really started after France was, quite frankly, ran out of Algiers.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Quite right. Misspoke. France was ran out of Vietnam.
Right.
I misspoke. They ran out of Algiers too, but that's another story.
Right.
But they ran out of Vietnam. My father taught me that. France was ran out of Vietnam. The United States stepped in under the guise of supporting with technical assistance, guides, so forth and so on. And the war after the death of President Kennedy escalated.
That's correct.
And then when they made the decision to commit to ground troops, that's when Vietnam got out of control. But again, to the best of my knowledge, the Vietnam War was never a declared war.
Right. There are some.
That's what they call a conflict.
Exactly.
Vietnam conflict.
And that's what they're referencing with regards to these debates. There's a difference between a declared war and a war that has been initiated pursuant to presidential action. And like you said, it's exactly with the example of Vietnam, where the president authorized the commitment of troops for the purposes of being technical assistants or advisors. So then it's not a quote unquote war, but the United States has been engaged. The problem has been where the president has committed troops and then Congress then has to commit money. There's a certain amount of money that's budgeted under the constitutional powers for Congress. Congress can create budgets, and they do on a regular basis for all branches of government, including the military. And then you have to consider how much money would need to be authorized for, specifically in this example, Vietnam. If the president commits troops in that case to Vietnam, then monies would have to be expended for the support, the maintenance, and the defense of those troops. And so that's where you've had some contention and some problems, especially with Vietnam, which wasn't popular. So then you have problems where you have members of Congress who are reluctant to put their name on any bill for the allocation of funds for military who are in an area of the world and that are participating in a war type activity or engagement that's just not popular with the voters. And so now we are at a situation where there is a possibility that there may be a need for our troops to then go to Russia. Has been the discussion with the debates, any of the foreign countries, and how much money is Congress really willing to commit, and is the next president really willing to commit troops to these foreign countries, knowing that there is some reluctance by the constituency, the voters, to have money expended for that purpose.
Well, case in point, despite Congress maybe having some reservations in terms of the support on a particular conflict, I would be shocked if they withhold the purse strings.
Right.
Because, they're not that crazy.
And in many instances that in review, the Congress does go on and allocate certain funds. The last one where it was very contentious was this one with Bush, because there was a lot of questions as to whether or not Saddam Hussein had anything to do with 9/11. And so the commitment and the monies toward financing that In retrospect, I think there has been some voters concerned about that, whether or not they should have committed monies toward that, whether or not Bush should have gone into that. And so there was a lot of discussion in the news that there wasn't sufficient funds for that endeavor.
Well, the point I wanted to make is that, again, despite opposition, Congress, majority of the time,
That's true.
when there's a military conflict,
That's true.
despite their reservations, the majority of the time, Congress is going to go along with the president. Why? They don't want to destabilize the nation.
Right.
Now, whether they hate the president, whether they disrespect the president, which they have done to, President Barack Obama, and, in a historical atmosphere, I think no one has been disrespected more than President Obama. That's another conversation.
Right.
But the point I want to drive home to our audience, since we're talking about foreign policy, is that when the president makes a decision as the leader of the country, even though it may be a lot of opposition to it, as with Bush, they're going to go along with it, because if you do not go along with it, you may put the nation at peril.
Right.
Because sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, you got to act with your instincts. And that's why it's very, very important that the person that, as we say in the business, that has their finger on the trigger is a person that is very rational, that can think things through and does not react emotionally. Because you act emotionally, it could be World War III.
Right. And so that is where these powers arise. So you have the Congress that has the power to declare war, and then the United States President, who has the power to be the commander-in-chief over all our military forces. In addition, there was also enacted in 1973 the War Powers Act, and that gave a president specifically the power to engage the United States in a type of military activity. However, he had to contact the Congress and give them notice within 60 days of committing troops to military activity. And then if Congress fails to enact legislation declaring war, then 30 days after the 60-day deadline, the military troops are to be removed from whatever area they were committed to. And so that is a piece of legislation that on its face limits the president's power to commit troops. However, as Attorney Powell has stated, and accurately so, even that piece of legislation has been interpreted and reinterpreted, and it is not necessarily, it has not been applied in the manner it specifically was intended to be applied, and it continues, as he stated, the Constitution continues to be a living document, but we wanted to provide you with the legislative and legal background for the debate discussion around the president's power to commit troops away from the United States. And so it really is necessary to consider the temperament of any presidential candidate, as well as any possible military experience, foreign relations experience that he may have, so that, like he stated, decisions that need to be made in the future under the presidency are done with as much information as possible, with the type of experience that is needed, the negotiation skills that can be used as opposed to military engagement, and recognizing that the president does not have the complete power to commit the money that is needed to make sure that that endeavor, whatever the plan is, the strategy is successful. So his ability to negotiate with Congress is paramount, in his ability to persuade the American people to support it is very crucial, because the money needs to be there. And so those are some really important points that must be considered when we're considering the presidential candidates. Another issue that was very popular and hit the news with regards to those debates have been presidential candidate Donald Trump's real estate development projects. particularly to the extent that they can generate jobs, that they're good for the economy. And one particular project, the Taj Mahal, was discussed in depth because it is one of the projects that was the subject of the bankruptcy that everybody's been talking about. In 1990, the Taj Mahal opened in New Jersey, in Atlantic City. However, before the year was out, it was being threatened with bankruptcy, and the entity that financed it was one of his Trump enterprises, and Donald Trump was the CEO at the time, did eventually end up filing bankruptcy. And the tax returns that have been released may possibly reflect the bankruptcy that was contained in the Taj Mahal. When you file bankruptcy, you tend to have to place all of the assets on the petition that belongs to the entity that's filing bankruptcy. In Donald Trump's case, it may have been him personally in addition to his corporation. So these are some of the questions that the voting public should be investigating when they're taking into consideration his ability to do well and provide economic streams through his past business projects. But Attorney Powell, you have some experience with real estate developments, correct? Especially with regards to the city.
I'm going to give you just Reader's Digest version. There's case law that the federal government, the city government, the state government, through incentives, can spur private developments. What are we talking about? We're talking about that technically a businessman can come to the county, can come to the state, can come to the city with a project saying, if you allow me to have this property at a rock bottom price, sometimes for free, you may be able to justify it on the basis that the development project is going to eventually put money in the public coffers. What are we talking about? We're talking about sales dollars, sales tax off of the revenue off of merchandise sold. What are we talking about? We're talking about eventually property taxes, because the land vacant is obviously assessed at a lower value than land that is occupied. Also, there's another layer of effect. We're talking actually jobs, okay? If the project is run right, obviously it should spur some hiring. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey. Here's where you have to really have somebody in control at the top to make sure that the public funds are not just being misused. What are we talking about? We're talking about the jobs. With the City of Chicago, with the MBW, which I was a part of under Harold Washington's administration, at that particular time, we were very serious about using minority contracts, very seriously about using women-owned contractors, very serious about hiring. That's when you talk about the trickle-down effect. A development project, if it's run right, can, again, tax dollars, off sales tax dollars, employment. Hopefully, there's something in place that the local residents will get some type of employment in terms of the construction jobs. Also, if the project is run properly, you say if it's a development project that's a shopping center, that local people will be hired on a permanent basis. So, again, there is case law that a private developer can be aided by the city, county, or state in the development of a project. Infrastructure is very expensive. When we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about sewer lines, water lines. And sometimes, depending upon the type of development project, the developer may be on his or her own in terms of the infrastructure improvements, meaning they have to come in there and pay for laying the lines, laying the water lines, laying the sewer lines, so forth and so on. On a typical real estate project, hopefully on the residential, the developer is going to pick an area that has water lines and sewer lines already in the immediate area. However, 9 times out of 10, if it's new construction, the developer is probably going to be responsible from running from the house that he's building or the apartment building he's building, running a tap going into the street to tap into an existing water line. And so those are some of the nuances that go into a development project in terms of spurring growth and for the immediate area.
So that is the type of information that you would need to really assess whether or not Donald Trump's projects, particularly like the Taj Mahal, was going to be economically beneficial for New Jersey. Or would and thereby could Donald Trump do something if he was successful? If he was successful in doing that in New Jersey with the Taj Mahal, for example, could he then be successful on a national scale in spurring jobs, economic development, as Attorney Powell is talking about, and tax revenues from the sales? Unfortunately, the Taj Mahal is closing. As of this year, it announced on August 3rd that the Taj Mahal will be closing permanently. It was taken over by another entertainment association after Donald Trump's entertainment company that owned the Taj Mahal went bankrupt. And so that owner, the ICANN Entertainment Corporation, stated that they have been running deficits, losing money in the millions for 18 months. So it just was not feasible for them to continue to have that casino operating. Unfortunately, that will result, as according to the reports, in about 3,000 job losses or more in New Jersey as a consequence of the closing of Taj Mahal. Had it been successful, as Attorney Powell stated, there would have been permanent jobs and employees at that facility that could count on not only income but health insurance, as well as maybe even some pensions. Casinos do generate money as far as sales tax revenues. That no longer will be there because of the closing. So when you assess the business ventures of someone like a Donald Trump, and you want to make sure that he would be able to make that possible on a national scale, those are the factors that you would consider, as Attorney Powell said. Was the business viable? Did it generate tax revenues? Did it generate employment? What type of employment? Was it just low-wage employment? Did it have health insurance as well as pension opportunities for those employees? And what type of tax investments did the local population make? The city council, the state, did they forego tax revenues on the basis of the promises that someone like a Donald Trump would be able to generate these jobs? And if they have not been able to do that, then that means not only was the business bankrupt, but that state or city that made gave certain tax breaks and so forth lost that money, and won't be, in addition to the fact that they won't be receiving the tax revenues, and they won't be receiving jobs. And now those individuals who are employed were employed by Taj Mahal will now be on the tax revenues with unemployment. So those are the things that people really need to consider when they're considering the information that is now being disseminated regarding not only Donald Trump's tax releases of his tax filings, but also the successfulness of past business ventures. So I also wanted to state that, like I said, the Cook County Bar will be here at 6 p.m. on Wednesdays. We will be here talking about various topics of legal information from domestic relations, real estate, landlord-tenant, criminal law, and we encourage all of the viewers that are listening in today to tune in next week to hear another one of our members speak on a legal issue. Thank you for tuning in today. You have a great night.